What is the most interesting backstory you've seen?
Ooh.
Most interesting backstory? I think for me, I really like Will's backstory when he was playing in one of my campaigns most recently. He was playing a wizard, and he had his book of spells. But the thing is, also with his book, is he kept a diary of everything that happened because for some reason he could not remember anything that happened prior to the day before. So every morning he would have to read his book to learn who he was.
Pure amnesia, not in the form of like character backstory, but just like literal everyday amnesia.
So, yeah. So it was kind of like Memento, if you think about that. I think he thought he was a dragon. So at one point he was changed into a little gnome wizard, and every day he would just have to constantly try to read what he wrote to remember what happened the day before and who to trust.
Yeah, the idea was that anybody could rewrite his memories by just changing his book, which is handcuffed to him at all times. And so I left it open for the GM, because in the book it says, I am a dragon that was polymorphed into a gnome or whatever he was. But that might have been false. Someone could have just written that.
Oh, so you don't even know your true anything.
Yeah, and so as far as the story goes, I left that open so that David could just, pull out the strings he needed to for the narrative.
Oh, that's good. Oh, I love that. I think for me, my favorite backstory that I've had a player play is this player. My first game, his name was Dylan. He played basically a retired rock star named Ivor Reed. So he played a bard that was just like a run-of-the-mill retired rock star. Like he's, obviously has been involved in a lot of drugs, a lot of alcohol. And it was just incredible to see someone who's like obviously washed up. And like, it would be great to have me with NPCs running up to him and be like, oh, wait, I remember you. You're that old rock star, aren't you? Just have him be like, wait, you're Ivor Reed from that old bard band. And so it was really great. And so he was playing as this character, and he essentially said, like, I don't know if I like this bard character, like maybe I want to be more of kind of a protagonist. I don't know if I want to be this support character that's kind of this older kind of uncle figure to all the other characters. And so I was like, sure, like if you want your character to die, if you want to make a new character, whatever, being the good DM I am. And so I said, yeah, whatever you want to do with this character, you can. And so there was an instance where they were basically cornered by a bunch of hobgoblins. And he approaches and goes like, I want to try to charm them with my guitar.
Oh my
And I
gosh.
go, okay, like, listen up. If you fail this roll, like, you're going to be slaughtered. Like, this is going to be a bloodbath. Like, this will end badly. And he goes, I know. And so he goes up, and then I go, all right. And he rolls a nat 20. And he rolls a nat 20, and it's just like all of the hobgoblins, I said, just go into crisscross applesauce and just start to listen to this beautiful music the bard is presenting. And then the whole party escapes, and it's like this wonderful, perfect scene. And the player ended up saying, like he's like, that was the moment I fell in love with my character. And he's like, oh, like, all right, this silly backstory and this ridiculous nonsense, like that role is what made me go, okay, this makes sense, and I want to see how this plays out. And it was just so perfect. So I'd say that retired rock star Ivor Reed as the bard was probably the best backstory I've seen.
Mine is actually at your bachelor party, Jake.
Oh, yes.
I flew to Kentucky, and after just a whole day of travel, excitedly sat down, and we played Dungeon Crawl Classics, which, if you don't know, is just a sort of an old school, new school type of game. Everybody played as 3 level 0 characters, and your friend Chris, who I guess now is also my friend, one of his characters was this disgusting beggar named Beetle. And like the character itself wasn't particularly memorable outside of the physical portrayal that Chris gave to the guy. So imagine a person rhythmically swaying to the left and the right as they speak, and he has this high-pitched, strange voice, and he would do these strange hand movements, almost like a marionette, like as if he was being puppeted from elsewhere. He just brought this character to life in a way that most D&D characters aren't. And this is a level 0 throwaway
not level 1
character.
level 0.
Level 0.
Yeah.
And I thought if he could put this kind of commitment into a nobody garbage character, like I would love to play a full campaign with them. But anyway, that was Beetle, played by Chris. And I think he died in that.
Oh, he definitely died. I remember. It was sad because you see the direct amount of effort he put into, and then it's the Dungeon Crawl Classics just slaughterhouse, and it's like Beetle, no.
I think he carried as much treasure as he could and died like that guy in The Mummy who gets trapped in the tomb with all the treasure.
Absolutely.
Welcome to Vox Arcana. I'm William.
I'm Jake.
I'm David.
This is a Dungeons & Dragons podcast, episode 9, Backgrounds. Tonight we're talking about character backgrounds.
Yes.
David, what are character backgrounds?
Character backgrounds are the background of your character.
As you can see, David is a college-level writer because his padding experience is unparalleled.
Off the charts. Anyways, getting into what backgrounds actually are, they're the experiences that your character had before the current session. So what did they do? Where were they born? Where were they raised? Mm-hmm. Things like that. What shaped their life into the person they are now, and why are they in this adventure?
What's the purpose of backgrounds?
See, I think backgrounds are vitally important because they give you context for each character, and they aren't just in this weird vacuum. Especially if you let the players know the background of the world, you can allow them to have backgrounds that shape your world together, and it can be more collaborative. I think backgrounds are vital, and honestly, a big red flag for me is if I go, hey, what do you want your background to be? Or like, what is your backstory as a character? And they go, I don't know. I go,
oh no,
I'm worried, right? Because it's like I want a narrative-filled campaign. I want an interesting.
Wait, did the player say that he's worried? It's like that's the only trait he gives you is he's just constantly worried.
Listen up. I'm always worried. No, no, like just hearing a player that makes a character that doesn't have a backstory, I go, oh no. Mm-hmm. They're not invested in my world. They're not invested in their character, and it's going to be very hard to go from there, you know?
I think that's a great point that you make, Jake. The background is what really ties you into the world to begin with. And if you don't have that background, then you're not going to be invested in the game or in the story or in the people of the world.
It's almost, I think it comes a bit from video games, because a lot of players these days are coming from
absolutely.
So let's say you play in, like, World of Warcraft, for example. You're responsible for your character's skin color, facial features, and a garbage name that you just crap out.
Right? And hairstyle.
And you enter the world. Oh, don't forget the hair. Yeah. Anyway, and you enter the world, and then you are kind of experiencing the world. It's being revealed to you as you go. But in D&D, that's put up front, where you are interacting with the world before your character is made. And so I think the backgrounds are a great tool to use that, because most people that I play with, they're not used to this kind of creation. They're like, well, I'm just going to play and then I'll find out what happens. It's like, no. You are from this world. You have friends and connections and relationships already when you start at level 1 or level 0, as the case may be.
Like that is incredibly profound, what you said, of saying, oh, your character is involved in the world before the world was made. Like that is just mind-blowing to realize that, like, your players that you introduce to your worlds, they have a big part in crafting said world based on their backstory. And oftentimes we kind of just delegate the backstory to just this boring thing we have to go through at the final part of in D&D 5e's building Brunor. You're like, oh, I gotta do backstory now. It's very, it is the last thing you do, but I think it has vast, important meanings, and it can have overarching things that affect the story deeply, especially if you talk to the dungeon master and like collaborate with them. Like, you can have plot points that really stand out throughout the campaign.
Arguably, for me, the background is the most important part of your character because it tells you how you play it. While the stats tell you the abilities that you can do, your background informs the way in which you are going to make decisions within the game, the way you're going to interact between the players and other people.
So I'm going to summarize that like this. Your stats tell you what your character can do, and your background tells you what your character has done.
Oh, yeah.
And will probably do in the future.
And that's the confusing bit is like, depending on what level you start at, is like how much has your character done in the past. But I guess in general, what are some red flags of like, if you hear someone say this before they make their character, do you go, oh dear?
Anytime that a player says that they want to play an actor or a character from a movie, they're like, "Oh, I'm Jason Bourne," or "I'm just playing as Bruce Wayne."
Oh, no.
I'm like, well, and some people, and it's not like they're bad people, or even that they're very lazy. It's just like that's what excites them, and that's what they're familiar with.
Yeah.
But I always say like, okay, what about Batman? What about Bruce Wayne excites you? Like, let's take parts of that personality and make that your own thing, and without just carbon copying a character.
What scares me even more was when they choose bad characters from TV or movies. I want to play Jar Jar, or I want to play the Joker.
Okay, that scares
those are the
me.
people who...
Imagine just like, I want to play the Joker. Like, excuse me, Daniel, I need you to leave.
I told you not to come back here.
I have a restraining order on you. You need to leave. But like, yeah, I think you're right.
It's like, why are you wearing that face makeup?
No, but I think you're right. If a player comes up and says, I want to be James Bond, or I want to be Captain America, like, you're like, all right, buddy, like, what do you like about that? And let's distinguish that and make a character like that, but not having a background that has been already written by comic book writers or movie writers,
So oddly enough, I think that when a player does suggest that kind of character copying, you get some insight into what they're excited to play. So we had one guy, he probably listens to the show actually. His name is Eric. And he always wants to do tricks and flips and climb up buildings and shoot stuff with arrows. And I think he made that character like Legolas or something. Like in everything
Something
except
like that,
name,
yeah.
he was Legolas.
No, his name was Aang, I think.
Oh, yeah, he was like an airbender. Anyway, and that was actually a pretty cool character.
Yeah.
Because I knew what he wanted to do. The problem is that 5e can be really restrictive at the low levels with what you can actually do.
yeah.
And he's like, I fire like 3 arrows into this guy. I'm like, okay, well, you get 1 attack, but we'll just say it fires 3 arrows. And that makes me feel like a bad dad,
Yeah.
So let's get into each of the different backgrounds that 5th edition has given us. So we'll go through each one of them.
Briefly.
Yeah, just briefly, we'll go through each one of them alphabetically. So let's start with the Acolyte. What do you guys think of the Acolyte background?
So this is a person who works for a temple. I feel like Acolyte tends to have kind of a negative, like culty kind of connotation.
Huh.
Yeah.
The way 5e explains it is more of just a priest, a servant of a church.
I've definitely found it to be one of the less common ones that I've had in my games. I find it has a lot of cool gameplay implications where you are dealing with the gods. You're going to be dealing with temples, which are nice, like, religious ties into your game, where you can go around and that gives players a way to interact with people in the town that they might not know because they have the connection to a mutual god or things like that.
I'm at kind of the opposite. Like, a lot of my spellcasters have ended up being acolytes in my games. Like, this is a pretty common background from what I've seen. So I don't know, because I get the proficiencies religion and insight, which are both pretty common in my games, being more social games. And yeah, I don't know. I've seen this quite frequently, and I feel like I feel like 5e, like you said, it's kind of a culty feel to it, but 5e has done a good job of being like, no, 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 this is a background that comes from kind of just a church or just religious order thing.
Right. And then I want to briefly mention each of these features, because each background comes with a feature. You get the Shelter of the Faithful, which means that if you find... if you're at a temple, shrine, or established presence of your faith, you get free healing and care, which is cool. Because you're like, oh, well, I follow...
that makes sense.
Lathander.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
go
yeah.
stay there.
Let's go stay at the
They'll
temple.
take care of us.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on to the Anthropologist. If you're following along at home, we're actually using the D&D Beyond. It's the free access to all of their backgrounds. And so this is everything that has been officially released for 5e. So there's a bunch of these that aren't in the normal player's handbook. I encourage you to follow along at home.
Or don't.
I think the Anthropologist is great. I don't know if it's because I'm currently playing in a Tomb of Annihilation campaign, but like just the concept of like someone who's really interested in like ancient ruins, it kind of fits into a D&D setting really well, because there is an abundance of ancient ruins all over, and having someone who is like directly interested in like the exploration nature of it really helps, and like getting players out of cities and into more crazy environments, you know?
No, yeah, I totally agree. It's going to give the players more reason to be interested in the world that you've created, because their character is naturally inclined to want to discover and learn more about what has happened in the past of your world, and maybe why these ruins exist, and more reason to explore them.
So I haven't purchased the Tomb of Annihilation pack on D&D Beyond, so I can't see what feature they have, but it's called Adept Linguist. So I feel like my educated guess is that they can speak or understand more languages than normal.
Yeah. So the next one is Archaeologist, which the more I think about what I said was the exact same thing for Anthropologist, because it's like, yeah, they want to explore ancient ruins and be very active in like getting out of their comfort zone, or getting out of the party's comfort zone to go, search ancient ruins. And so, yeah, I feel like these are very, very similar.
They are.
Yeah.
One is more about like studying people, and the other one's studying old cultures. So I think they do kind of crossover in some ways. But I think both of these are super cool. I might just purchase the Tomb of Annihilation pack next time there's a big sale, so I can get these backgrounds. I'm not paid off, by the way. I'm just saying.
Sponsored by D&D
If
Beyond.
D&D Beyond, if you were listening and you would like to do a sponsorship, contact me at
Just send us a few $1,000 and we'll think about it.
That would be all of their profits, though.
I would. Oh no. I'll take like $5.
Okay, so the next one is the Charlatan. Personally, I love this one. What do you guys think?
So a charlatan is anybody who's essentially a faker, right? Like what's the right
snake
word?
oil
Con
salesman.
Yeah, snake oil salesman.
Yeah.
They're con man.
Oof.
This is a great background, because it goes really well with people who play bards, people who play things like warlocks, very high charisma characters, people who like to swindle their way out of situations, and the hijinks and the trouble that they get themselves into often makes the game much more enjoyable and hilarious for all the other players at the table.
Oh, I'm reading through their feature, and it says they have the false identity. It says they have a second identity that includes documentation, established acquaintances, and disguises that allow you to assume that persona. And I'm thinking,
so good.
We should have a entire campaign where everyone's background is a charlatan, and you're running like 3 different guilds, but none of you are really who you say. So this is one of the things that excites me about 5e, is that if you just read closely what they've presented, and you realize, like, I'm personally not using most of what they provide, but when I read it, I want to.
Yeah. I'm just imagining a whole group of charlatans, and people keep thinking that members of the group are getting swapped out, and it's just someone changing their identity. I think that would be hilarious and so much fun.
That's so cool.
So the next three I'm gonna kind of combine because they're from the Sword Coast Adventures Guide, which
no one has bought.
I've read some of it in a bookstore, and it's pretty interesting. But like,
I saw a review of it online once.
But at the same time, like these are very interesting. So there is the City Watch, the Clan Craftsman, and the Cloistered Scholar. Have you guys heard or used any of these types of backgrounds before?
Never.
I don't even know what the word cloistered means.
I think it's a type of shellfish that you eat by cracking open.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I love the oystered scholars.
Delicious.
So
I don't know if we have much to say.
I mean, I think I've used the background of a city watch, like a city guard before.
Like unofficially?
Yeah, like I've combined other backgrounds to use kind of the Sword Coast Adventure Guide version, but like, yeah, I like the idea of a city guard turned adventurer, you know? Maybe they took an arrow to the knee and now they're like, you know, involved in adventuring. Like, I like the idea of that.
Isn't that the exact opposite of what happened?
Maybe it was a magical arrow that healed his knee.
Oh. Okay, to be fair, listeners, I did realize that what I said was the exact opposite of what happens, actually. But like, I like the idea of that opposite of like a city guard becoming an adventurer as opposed to a retired adventurer becoming a city guardsman. Like, I think William, I think you had okay, this is really interesting. Will, you had a game that I played in, which was all girls and me. And all of the girls had very profound, interesting characters. Where one was kind of a Mulan type fighter, another one was a very interesting bard that did the cloth weaving to do their magic.
Yeah,
and they were a seamstress.
Yeah, anything very fast.
Like an interesting seamstress. And there was one other one, and then I was the most basic, boring. Like, my character was just a city guardsman with a family. And so it was incredibly interesting to see all of these girls playing these characters that had all these profound different backstories, and me to be just this very basic city guard that had a wife and child that he was trying to get money for. And
I recall that wife and child were the central peril for the entire adventure. Because at one point you were like, you had to hold your baby like behind your shield while you were fighting.
Yes, no. My wife approached me and said, "Hold this," which was my child, and handed me my child, and my wife left, and I just was holding my child in combat. Yeah, so I don't know. I think the idea of a city guard is really interesting for a backstory, and I think it can be. I think it can work.
Yeah, it definitely does. I mean, it's good enough to be official. Criminal Spy is next on the list. Criminal or Spy is next on the list. And I think this is the grown-up version of a... what's the one down here? The little street rat urchin
Oh, yeah,
guy?
yeah.
The urchin, yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a more interesting... maybe a continuation of that background. It says you're an experienced criminal with a history breaking the law. It's tailor-made to be a thief, but I would love to play a paladin with this background.
Oh, that's good.
That would be so awesome to have. I'm thinking like a paladin who's a spy, who's like trying to infiltrate other religious factions and just like oust them.
Like a secret inquisitor kind of. Wow.
So in like basically the bottom line is picking a class and then picking a very interesting background can like change the complete idea of the class. Backgrounds have much more power than people think. Because if you think of a cleric who's also a criminal, it's like, whoa, like that is a big deal. Like that is a huge, shift in what you would normally assume a cleric would be.
Yes. I think playing against type is a great way to open up your imagination.
Yes.
Because like you say a criminal spy and you're thinking, oh, well, he's going to be a rogue. But actually we should, as we're going through here, just pick unconventional classes to go with these.
That would be great.
Oh, and then your feature is you have a criminal contact, and that is you just have a network of people you can reach out to, and they will transfer messages and yeah.
So one of the things I would like to note with this is it does say criminal spy, and I feel like no one that I play with has used the spy aspect of this, and I would love to see someone being have to constantly check in with people in order to give information because they are a spy and they're doing secret operations while they're with the adventuring party. So they're constantly having to check in with their handler or whatever you want to call it.
I think that's
that would
tricky.
be really cool.
I think it really is tricky because it's like, do you want... I mean, this goes into the whole idea of alignment and like, do you want a character in your party that is like actively against your party's goals? And so it really makes sense if you're in kind of this lawful organization and your party's mostly good and you're just sending information about like, okay, this is what's happening. This is, but it's really hard if you're like in a lawful evil organization and most of your party is like chaotic good. It's like, okay, you're the antagonist now. So the whole spy aspect of backgrounds is very risky because it's like, it creates this whole new aspect of antagonism with the party, depending on their alignment.
Or maybe you were a spy who got a burn notice.
Oh, that could work great.
Yeah, and so
would be cool.
And that's why he's with the party. Is he's like
Just
trying
get
to
out,
scrape his way back into the good graces of the organization. Oh, so fun.
I generally like these characters because they're more charismatic. I feel like the backgrounds that are more charismatic, I generally like more, obviously, because I like more social games with more social encounters. And so the characters who are more charismatic and like have, layer upon layer of lies that are trying to uphold gives me so much stuff as a DM to like manipulate and change and be like, wait a second, you don't look like that man I heard earlier. Just like abilities to wreck their whole plan socially is what I really like about the criminal and the spy and kind of the charlatan in general.
So next we have the entertainer. So how would you describe this class?
Bard.
It says you...
Bard.
The class? So for the background, it says you thrive in front of an audience, you know how to entrance, entertain, and even inspire them.
I don't think I've ever played a bard that has not picked an entertainer background. I really don't think.
They really go together.
Or criminal.
What would be an unconventional class? What about a barbarian?
That's good.
Like he's good at killing, but like showing off.
Kind of a gladiator class.
Like a blood sport entertainer.
You could have a wizard.
Oh, weird.
Oh, okay. So Penny Arcade had a web series for a long time, and Jim Dark Magic was a wizard entertainer who was constantly hawking his show.
Yeah.
And so he would like give out business cards once they had like defeated the evil in town. He would, promote himself.
Like I'm imagining you could have like an illusionist wizard. It reminds me of Bilbo Baggins or Frodo, like whenever at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings when
the fireworks.
He's like putting on the show. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Doesn't Gandalf?
Or that was Gandalf.
Yeah.
Oh, because a wizard.
Yeah. I think
absolutely. Like I feel like magic in Dungeons and Dragons has like a weird connotation because we're like, oh yeah, we see fireworks shows all the time, and whatever world we live in 2018. But like magic in kind of a medieval setting is like incredibly beautiful and therefore entertaining. And so like almost any magic user could be an entertainer just because they could use their magic,
Actually, somebody with just fireworks and no magic at all would be thought of as a magician.
Yeah, like even think about it as like you're out of money, you're tired, you're exhausted, but you have one quote unquote spell slot left. Like, why don't you go to the bar and do this miraculous, beautiful illusion, and then get some money, and then get a drink and go to bed,
That's kind of in line with their feature. It's called By Popular Demand. It says you can always find a place to perform, and you can trade performance for room and board. And after you perform, you become something of a local celebrity. That's good.
Yeah.
So it's built into the class. Looks like the designers were one step ahead of Jake.
Always.
Always.
So I want to make sure that we mention the faction agent and the far traveler from Sword Coast's guide. I think the faction agent goes along with the I think there's 6 or 7 factions like the Harpers, and but that's more for the organized play of D&D, which I don't do. And then the far traveler, as far as I can tell, is just sort of a remixed version of what's he called, the Outlander.
Yeah, I guess it makes sense. I think,
except he's more from beyond the different planes of existence.
I think what I like, the faction agent, I think plays a bigger role in my games because the Harpers and the Order of the Gauntlet are like pretty big factions in my world, and so saying like, yeah, I'm just a bookie for one of them, or I'm just a I'm a secret keeper for the Harpers. All that works fantastically well for my games, but I don't know if I don't know. You have to kind of know my world before you do that. And that's the whole balance with backgrounds is like the GM communicating their world before you make your background and knowing what works with the world before you start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Moving on, we have the folk hero from the basic rules.
Dude, I love the folk hero.
And I'm always happy whenever someone picks it.
I think it works well because a lot of people, especially if you start at like level 1, they're like, I've done all this cool stuff. You know, I've slayed this owlbear and I'm the champion of this small village. And, you know, it doesn't really work if you're like a guild artisan or if you're just like an urchin. But like if you say, I'm a folk hero of this town, it's like, even though you're level 1, okay, that makes sense, you know?
Like you put out the great fire of the town.
Yeah, that's true. You don't have to do something terribly large to become a folk hero. Maybe you lied your way to the top.
That's good.
Maybe you're like a washed up adventurer.
You just did something minor like 20 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. And then now you decided to like go back out and try to.
That's so great.
Because people like
imagine someone who like in our world just did something like very, very minor. Let's say someone was trying to, they were suicidal and they were trying to jump in front of a subway. And this guy jumps in front of this guy and like just stops him from jumping. But he's still kind of riding that fame like 30 years later. It's like, okay, I guess he's a folk hero. It's something that's so minor. But like, I don't know. I feel like this can go in so many different directions that, like you said, David, I love when people pick this. Because it can be really interesting, like playing with fame, especially in small areas.
Yeah.
It looks like their feature is you fit in with common folk with ease, and you can always find a place to hide or rest. I think a lot of these are just about having a shelter in a lot of ways.
Yeah, like
tying you into giving you a connection into the town so that you can find a place to stay and interact.
I think a lot of, this goes into the philosophy of backgrounds of just like a lot of it is justification to the DM. And the dungeon master would be like, oh, you don't know anyone in town. And then someone's like, wait here, I'm a folk hero. And then the dungeon master's like, all right, you find a place, because it gives you a little bit more leverage to be able to justify some things you otherwise wouldn't. I feel like the folk hero is often picked by people who are min-maxers or munchkins or power gamers who are just like, I want to make the best character. Obviously, they pick the folk hero just to give them the most social leverage and the most power in their background,
Yeah.
That's interesting, because as someone who people identify as a power gamer.
Look at him dodging own. As someone who
I was
lies
about to own it, and then I'm like... As someone who other people claim to be a power gamer.
Just admit it.
I haven't played a folk hero, so...
Huh. Interesting.
No.
So the next one is the Gladiator. I don't think I've had anyone in my games pick this one, but it just has so much built-in flavor. Have you guys ever had someone be a Gladiator background?
No, that sounds great.
Yeah.
Though.
Yeah, the Gladiator is just someone who fights for fun.
Or for profit.
And I think that those are the people who are going to cause a lot of conflict in your games in a good way, because they're going to want to fight people all the time.
Yeah. I think for me, like one of the classes I dislike the most is the Barbarian, because I like more social games, and barbarians tend to muck up social games. But the gladiator adds a weird twist to that of like combat as sport, not as a philosophy, but like as a viewing, entertainment, world building thing of like combat being fun to watch. And so having a player that does these ridiculous moves and knows how to work a crowd while they're fighting, it's a really interesting concept that I want to see more of that I haven't.
It really suggests something about the world if there is a place where fighting, blood sport is done. If you have a player coming from like an ancient Rome type of area, and then you meet this country bumpkin folk hero who killed a bear one time, this is a huge difference, a huge disconnect and change in their own personal world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the next one is the Guild Artisan. Have you, or the Guild Merchants? Have you guys used this one?
I have.
I think I played as one once.
I have never used one. But and I've never had one in my game.
It's hard to get excited for. Let's just say that.
Oh man, I'm so good at making pots. Yeah.
Maybe if you want to get the whole power of your union behind you, but I don't get excited for like union politics in my D&D. That's not why I play.
I feel like it depends on what you do, but I feel like a guild artisan can be very, very, very good for a bard. If you want to include that, and it's a much more urban setting. But at the same time, if it's more of a rural setting, or if it's more of just a wide campaign, I don't know how you would ever pick a guild artisan over an entertainer.
Seeing this makes me think that there's some backgrounds that'd be better suited for different types of campaigns. So there's a rumor right now that the next published Wizards of the Coast adventure is going to be a city only adventure, like a Waterdeep thing. We don't know what city it's going to be. It's probably going to be all of the Sword Coast cities. Anyway, but if you had this densely packed, faction-based story, then a guild artisan would be super
very
useful because you have connections. And in fact, everybody's backgrounds, like whether it's the spy or the city guard or the guild guy, you would have so many connections into the story, and they don't go anywhere. Because right now, if you pick a guild artisan, and then the first thing you do is you travel halfway across the world to go kill the Dark Lord.
I have no support.
Well, what's the point of that, really?
The background doesn't really come into use or come into play, which is kind of tragic and sucks.
Yeah, so the campaign is going to determine the effectiveness.
For sure.
Mm-hmm. So we have the Hermit next.
Okay. It's the worst.
A man after my own heart.
I hate this one.
I mean,
I'm just going to be honest.
I think we all agree the Hermit is... Okay, so the Hermit can be played good, but it's hard to be played good. Yeah, the Hermit is naturally, if you have a murder hobo, they're like, ooh, I want to be a Hermit.
I think from now on, in any game where I have a relatively new player, I'm just going to say you can't play the Hermit. Because I think it takes an experienced player to make the Hermit a good background.
Yeah. Anytime you can have a background that just officially says, oh, you have no connection to the world at all. You don't know anyone. You don't know anything.
It's like, I've been isolated for the past 100 years just living in the forest. I know 0 people.
My background is that I have no background.
So, essentially backgrounds from a philosophical perspective, in game design and, for Dungeons & Dragons, they want to give the dungeon master hooks to be like, oh, you can pull in this guild artisan, guild, or you can pull in this family backstory, you can pull in.
You have this criminal boss.
All of those things are contribute. The Hermit is an anti-hook. It is an anti-contribution. It's like, hey, dungeon master, you got nothing.
Try hooking me into the story.
All right. So I would challenge us to make a great character with the hermit background.
Okay,
right now,
let's do it.
Sure
okay, so Hermit, I have a Hermit background character in one of my games right now, and
what is it? What does the Hermit actually say?
This Hermit in my game is a tiefling fighter who is a basically sellsword, merchant, soldier of fortune that is just trying to make money and whatever. And so he has these random events, basically I use whenever he rolls a nat 1, he will teleport into hell, essentially. And he'll be freaked out, and he'll see horrible demons and all this stuff, and then he will go back to the normal plane of existence, and he'll have to deal with that, and all his party members would be like, where were you? And he'll be like, oh, nothing, whatever. And so his character works really well because of his like weird teleportation isolation, and it fits with him being isolated because he has not been like metaphorically isolated, but he's been literally physically isolated via this teleportation thing. And so his character kind of butts heads with everyone else because he is somewhat of a hermit, but it does work because the logic all works. But I don't know. I've yet to finish the campaign to see how his arc ends up, but in general, this is very, very hard to pull off thematically.
I actually have a hermit background that I think would be interesting to play. So let's say you have a character. He existed about like 100 years prior to when the campaign took place. And then for some reason, he was just banished to another realm.
Oh.
And now he has recently gotten freed, and he is now back in society, and he's trying to gain vengeance against all of the people who have like banished him before. So they're all super old, and he's just going through and dealing with all these older
It's like Kill
people.
Bill.
Yeah, it's like Kill Bill.
I think that could work,
okay.
but that would take a very special player to basically role play in your worlds and to be able to say, oh, your world was different 100 years ago. Like, we can look at our current history and be like, oh yeah, Captain America would react differently when he woke up in 2015 or whatever. But like, for a character to be like, oh yeah, 100 years ago it was different because of what? They would have to collaborate with you a lot.
Yeah.
I think it'd be fun because all you gotta do is make comments like, "Oh, well, this city used to be a little settlement 100 years ago." I would add to that, David, and say that the party he teams up with, somebody in that party is his relative.
Yeah.
That's good because it gives him a link in.
And then he's like, they're explaining things to him, like how the world has changed, and then you get those jokes like, "Well, back in my day."
That could work really good. I think. Yeah, I think the hermit takes a special. I think as a DM, when a character is being like, I want to be a hermit, you go, all right, John, are you a murder hobo?
Why don't you just go play Skyrim by yourself?
But if they're like, oh no, I want to be a hermit because that would really be interesting with my dynamic and relationship with all my other compatriots, you're like, all right, that's pretty good. But in general, the hermit it takes a special player, I think, to have a good background with the hermit.
Jake, talk to me about the knight.
So, okay. The knight, I think the knight as a background can work very well as like a paladin or a fighter. But the knight has to kind of be in contrast with the rest of the characters unless you're doing a very stoic, high fantasy, medieval, like King Arthur setting. Like, normally the knight works well when all the other characters are mercenaries and, just normal D&D characters. And the knight is like a stoic, heroic, contrarian to the rest of the party.
Allow me to speak for the audience here. Ugh.
I think the knight can work, but you're right. It does take.
I would love to see.
Character.
I would love to see the knight with like a weird class combination. So you're like a knight wizard.
I'm trying to think. What would be the weirdest class for a knight background? Like, what would it be?
A knight thief.
What the heck? Oh, so maybe it's an order of knights who like their tenants require them to steal. Maybe
like
steal
a
from the
rogue?
rich, give to the poor.
So they're just
It's like a Robin Hood.
Robin Hood. Yeah.
But then, oh my gosh, yeah, that'd be weird.
That is so strange.
Or like a warlock knight.
Oh, it's a coven of knights.
Yeah.
We call it the nighttime knights.
90 knights.
90 nights.
90 nights.
That works for the assassins as well.
Oh man. All right, so
That's also their catchphrase.
90 night.
so the next
Okay.
is the noble. Have you guys had any nobles in your games, background wise?
I think I ran one actually. Like in like the 4 times I've ever played as a player. I think I played as well.
I've seen the noble played great, and it's awesome to see new players play the noble. I remember we had one of our mutual friends, his name was Sean, and when he started out, he played as a noble, and he approached the game very diplomatically, very
That's right.
just trying to deal with people in a very noble manner. He tried to use his nobility and leverage it into getting him better deals and
That's true.
things like that. It's a great starting background for people who are kind of new to the game, from what I've seen, and it gives you great ties into the world.
Wow, would not think that at all.
So it's definitely one of my favorites.
Okay, yeah. Now that you're remembering Sean, he had a writ or something that like proved that he
also had
was
a
in a noble
signet
house.
ring.
Yeah, signet ring. That's what it was. And he just flashed it at every opportunity, even though he was like on this desert island with a bunch of crazy people. And like Dave was saying, he always chose diplomacy first because that's what a noble would try instead of just pulling out a sword. And I thought it was great because this guy had never even played D&D before.
Yeah, that was the most impressive part.
Wow, that is really good. Because I don't think I played with a noble before. I played with a noble, but they basically played as like a soldier background and just kind of pulled out their nobility for, later stuff in like plot development. But to play as a distinctly privileged noble the whole time, that takes a lot of skill.
Next up is the Outlander, a person who grew up far from civilization and is now in an adventuring party.
Yuck.
Okay.
This is the Hermit just renamed.
I mean, if you're not playing a ranger, I don't know why you're an Outlander.
Okay, what's the class challenge here? Wizard? He lives on a farm and he just uses magic to do big crap.
How would a paladin be an Outlander?
I mean, you could do Order of the
Isolation,
or the Oath of the Ancients, Oath of the Ancients, where it's kind of like druidic.
Yeah, it's the druid paladin.
Yeah, I think
that's cool.
This really speaks testament to 5e and how the developers were like, all of these backgrounds can work. Like, there's none that you just laugh at, I mean, there's
a place for all.
There are several that you could laugh at, but in the end, they could work for any class, which is crazy. So, okay, so Outlander. Have you guys played with any good Outlanders or?
It seems like a few Rangers have been Outlanders. So their feature is that they essentially they get bonuses to exploring, and they always find food. They always can find food and water. However, this sucks because if you are playing 5e the way everyone plays it, you don't track food and water. And if you are tracking food and water, suddenly that doesn't matter at all because someone is an Outlander.
Yeah.
So
Weird.
It's really it solves problems annoyingly.
Yeah, I think it brings up the whole concept of, I don't know where I saw this, but it solves a problem that should be solved creatively, but it just kind of snaps your fingers and it's solved.
Yeah, it's magically solved.
Yeah, I think if we were doing a big survival thing, I would change it a little bit, but there's really no need.
Or I might get rid of it.
David would just kick it out completely, but I think there's some cool things.
Yeah, because okay, for both of you guys, have you ever looked at your players when they're making characters and be like, all right, listen up. None of this. You can't be this. You can't be that. Just forget about this background. Really? Have you done that?
No, never.
Yeah,
no,
I haven't either.
Actually done that. I'm pretty lenient.
It's funny because we complain about these and we're like, oh, I would never allow this. But then when I'm playing with people and they're like, oh, can I try out this hermit? I'm like, yeah, sure. What kind of hermit do you want to be? And they're like, how about a monk who lives out in the woods? I'm like, sure, super cool. Let's go. Can I be named James Bond? No.
That's where we draw the line. Is the name.
So yeah, I think really that's a good point. You shouldn't ever be kind of detrimental in it's very avoidance of things, but I think there's a subtle way to be like, are you sure you want to be a knight? There's a subtle way to address backgrounds that aren't overt. I don't allow Outlanders in my games.
Next up, we have the pirate.
Oh yeah, have you guys ever had a good pirate?
Exactly what it sounds like. No. It says it's from the player's handbook, but I don't think it is.
No, it is.
It's a subclass of the sailor.
It's a subclass of the sailor.
Sub background, I guess.
Yes.
I've had a good pirate character before. I think the pirate is interesting because it really is just a reflavored sailor, but it is, I don't know, I feel like it's pretty interesting, especially because you think of the classes, like the Rogue Xanathar's Guide Swashbuckler class. Like, I mean, come on. It just goes together like peanut butter and jelly. Like, I'm a pirate swashbuckler. It's like, yeah, obviously.
I would love to have a sorcerer pirate, and all your spells are kind of nautical themed. So your magic missile fires parrots.
No, it's just like a cannon that pops up and shoots out a magic missile.
Oh, it's so fun.
Yarr.
It's so fun.
Oh, I need to play a pirate.
Yeah, we should have a nautical.
Yarr, mateys.
I'm developing.
See, the pirate,
I'm always developing something.
makes me think of, because in my games, all turtles, their language just sounds like pirates. Yeah. And so when I think of like a pirate, it's like I can't imagine a pirate that's not a turtle. You know, just sticks his head on his shoulder. Like, how you doing there, mateys?
I think that might be racist.
I would reckon if they're not called species, if they're called races, then it is exactly racist.
I want to run a island hopping kind of exploration campaign, based loosely on Assassin's Creed Black Flag. I don't know how to make it really fun, but anyway, I think pirates would play a big part.
Oh
in that.
yeah, absolutely. Because like the whole idea of morality in pirates is really interesting, and especially I like the idea of a pirate as a background in the form of like a reformed pirate. Like someone who's like, I used to be a pirate, but now I try to obey the law. You know, like that's really interesting. So I think the pirate, it really is a complete sailor's sub background, but I think it can work good.
I think if you're looking at all these backgrounds as just ways to hook characters into the world, in the pirate's case, literally hook them into the world. It's just fun to have this guy have a bunch of connections with sailor types and dock officials and all these people. So once again, I think that a city-based campaign or even a city central campaign would be super fun.
Okay, so the next one is Sage, the Sage background. What do you guys think about this?
This guy's just a super nerd who just lives in a library. A library? Whoa. He lives in a library reading all day.
I don't think I've used this one before. Have you guys?
It seems like I have.
I mean, it makes sense, but I don't know if I have.
My first character was probably a sage.
Oh, I mean, David, yeah. You're like, what does the sass give me?
Was that when David had braces?
This magic scroll. What did it say?
Yeah, I think Sage...
We're going to get a mean voicemail from a fan with that lisp.
Oh, no.
We apologize in advance.
I don't mean any offense.
So, I think, you're right. This is the nerd character. And I think this character can really be interesting because, especially, like we said, of challenging the status quo, if this isn't a wizard, think of, a nerdy rogue who's just a high intellect
or a
sage rogue. You know?
I think a monk would be really cool.
Yeah.
Because rogue is already high intelligence, so I think a monk would be really...
It makes sense that you would have this monastery somewhere, and all you've done for 20 years is copy down some text.
You've just been copying books. That would be...
Oh, that's so interesting. Maybe he has glasses. I picture the Diablo 3 monk, but with just tiny little nose glasses.
Yeah.
Yes.
Huh. I think the Sage is good, but it fits a playstyle that is a little different than what it was optimal for me, which is kind of I want more social, I want more crazy abilities. This one is just straight up intellect. And so if you're making a character that is smart, I mean, really, this is the one to go for.
I think that there's a lot of connections to the world if you're smart, though.
Oh, yeah.
Because what you can do is you can have whole research groups where people are talking to co-researchers who are just trying to learn and gain information, so you have all sorts of webs of information.
Do it like Doctor Strange, where you have portals to other monasteries and they just talk to each other all the time.
That's really interesting. I don't know, it's hard to fit in without a character that's very devoted, not necessarily to the character but to their world. Because a lot of backgrounds are that. It's it is a hook into the world, not necessarily the character. I mean, it's a link from your character to the world.
It goes both ways.
It's a twofold thing.
Yeah. As for getting them to leave their monastery, you could do all kinds of things like burn it or I don't know, just displace them in some way.
Yeah.
That could be a huge adventure hook just right there.
So the next one is the Sailor, which we talked about quite a bit in Pirate.
Yeah.
I think this one is really good in an urban setting because I think we living in like a modern society neglect how much a like harbor plays into a city's life, especially a city on the coast.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I think like knowing the harbor master and knowing trade routes and knowing all this stuff is like really, really interesting as far as a character backstory goes. So like being a sailor and visiting faraway lands, like I think it's a great backstory.
Yeah. It gives you a reason to be used to seeing strange
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Because like
doing-
you see a
and doing-
tiefling and you go, oh, you know, I've seen several tieflings because I've been to this island or this island.
My wife's a tiefling.
Yeah, because
I'm a tiefling.
it gives you a reason to see like exotic things and to not be surprised. Yeah, I love the sailor background.
It is fun. It's different, I think, than something like a city guard or a soldier because you don't have that necessarily violent background,
Yeah.
but you still have that world traveler feel.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
you're just kind of like a lifeguard.
yeah, which because yeah, I think that really when you look at your background, you have to be like, does this plant me in a certain place and a certain kind of almost alignment or a certain like kind of feel? And the other kind, you know, the far other side of the spectrum is like, does this make me just a world traveler that just really grants me almost anything I want? You know, as far as exotic stuff you see.
Or just having connections in every
Yeah,
port.
that's a
Like,
big
not
deal.
necessarily a wife in every port, but being able to like say, hey, there's Mordecai, the
I know
bartender,
him.
in
Yeah,
wherever.
that is a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay,
Speaking of the soldier, here he is.
okay. Soldier's good. I think Soldier can be bad, but it can be great because it's very. I mean,
I
know
find it a little
it's-
dry. Like it's functional and it's good, but it's a little dry.
Kind of like a soldier's personality most of the time.
Whoa!
Wow.
As my players have proven.
I think with Soldier, all of these backgrounds have these very, very interesting traits, bonds, ideals, and flaws, which are incredible, which we will definitely explore on a future episode. But the Soldier's ones are just incredible because you can see kind of what you're afraid of or what you fear or what enemy destroyed your whole platoon of officers or whatever. You know, you it really digs deep into the world. Like you can't be a soldier background without knowing the world.
Yeah.
And it's good too because I think that war is such a great central tension to have in your campaign, even if it's nowhere near where your campaign really is. Knowing that there is fighting happening somewhere, and then having your soldier who's not fighting, that asks an interesting question as to why did they desert? Did they get injured? Did they just get fed up? Did they get discharged? And then depending on the rank and their specialty within that service, it just sets up your character by answering those questions.
Yeah. There's a lot of cool things that you can do with
I think it's pretty hard to look at your DM and be like, I'm a soldier, and then be like, okay, who did you serve? You can't dodge those questions. You know, like you have to be like, okay, I served in this militia, or I was a part of this army, or I fled this massacre, whatever. Like you are automatically ingraining yourself into the world, which is amazing.
There was,
you know,
in my last campaign, one of my characters, whose name also happened to be Will, he was a human cleric, but his background was a soldier, and he had been a healer with a dwarven military. And so he was like, the dwarves were endeared to him because of his service. So he had all kinds of high connections up in that military. I thought that was really cool because it's so different than, I was in the human military doing human military things.
being a human and not anything else.
Urchin.
So last up we have the urchin.
huh?
What is an urchin? Isn't that little spiky,
Dude, I'm
like,
telling you,
fish
that's what I
creature?
think of.
Yeah.
I don't think of what
It's
it
like
actually
the-
is. I think of like the sea anemone spiky thing.
Wait a minute. A sea anemone and a sea urchin are very different, Jake.
Listen up.
You would know this if you'd gone to homeschool.
Are they natural enemies?
Anemones.
Anemones.
Well,
So
now that joke's been made, that's like the one pun you can do with sea anemone. Okay.
okay, so urchins. Have you guys used them?
Oh yeah, every day.
Really?
Every
Really?
day I'm urchining.
I'm basically an urchin. I think the just the street rat character is a common facet of
This one can
games,
veer
yeah.
dangerously into the similar category as the hermit.
yes.
We'll talk about the what I call it, the shadow orphan later, where people can just take a background and be like, well, I have no connections to the world. I don't know anybody. I actually don't care about anyone specifically because I was a tortured soul who grew up in a gutter.
Yeah.
And now I want to kill everyone.
Oh.
That's a true story, guys. Like, I've played with 2 players who have just been like, no,
So
my
what?
parents
Okay,
are dead and I just killed
what makes the urchin different than like a criminal? That's my complication.
So I think of the urchin kind of like Aladdin, where
Who
he
is a
is
criminal.
just struggling to survive. Yeah, he is. But with the criminal, there's more of an organization.
Yeah.
You're more of
Oh.
a professional, like for hire. Whereas this is, you're just struggling on the streets to survive, just making your way around, maybe selling a few wares or swindling things. But
Yeah,
you're not actually.
you might not be good at being a thief.
Yeah.
You
But
just-
I think
That's what
So
real life
so the
is.
urchin implies some solidarity and some kind of like
yeah.
streetwise ingenuity and like personal luck as opposed to like a organizational criminal
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, you're either the 2 things that I imagine an urchin being is either like a hobo, or they would be kind of like a young kid who is just on the streets, and maybe they have some sort of mentor figure that they're working under, but otherwise they're just kind of like a younger, youthful person.
And maybe you would build that into, like if you had 2 characters and one of them is already a criminal or really any background, soldier, and they're mentoring this little urchin up out of the gutters, and they bring them into the party to make some money to have a real life.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay. I haven't seen many urchins, but I think this is redeeming it for me because it's like I get the difference between it and the criminal now. And it's not a spiky sea creature.
Well, I mean, technically it is.
Is it though?
Wait, so which was named first? Like, which sad, poor people in the gutter, or
One porky boy.
or one spiky?
I mean,
Pokey
we'll
boy.
have to.
Porky.
I think the only way to figure out is if people tweet us at Fox Arcana Pod.
Outside of 5e, there's a few other systems that I wanted to mention that get me really excited for character creation because they create super unique and very interesting backgrounds and character histories. The first one is from Fantasy Flight Games' Star Wars series of RPGs.
Yes.
Called The Edge of... They had 3 books. It was The Edge of the Empire,
Age of Rebellion.
Age of Rebellion, and then Force and Destiny. And so they had these... Each book had a different system of background generation, but my favorite one was from The Edge of the Empire, and that was Obligation. And what that means is, in that game, you're all playing as criminal scum, essentially. So think of Han Solo and Greedo and all of that side of Star Wars.
Chewbacca.
And because you're a criminal, you owe somebody something. And they had a lot of different categories.
Yeah, like obligation wasn't just like a debt. It could be, like you owe.
You have a family.
Yeah, like your family
that
was given
you just have
something
to take care of and put food on the table.
Yeah, or your family just needs to survive. Like obligation is such a big, varied noun that it works so well as a backstory because you have to think about what things other than your character's literal physical body has invested in the world.
So I have the list of all of the obligations from the game in front of me. I'm just going to read through them very quickly. Addiction, betrayal, blackmail, bounty, criminal, debt, duty bound, family, favor, oath, obsession, and responsibility. Each of these has a number associated with it, sort of a magnitude of it. So let's say you have a blackmail obligation. That means somebody has dirt on you, and they're constantly contacting you and making you do things that you really don't want to do. And just right there, like the narrative possibilities explode from one character's background.
Absolutely.
Choice. It's fantastic, and you can definitely do this in D&D, assuming you want to have kind of a criminal feel. Once again, going back to city crawling, I'm seeing into my future, and it's going to be in one.
The water's nice. Let's dive in.
The water's deep.
Yeah, I think this thing connects you into the world really well. So like obligation as all those, like the table you read, but then duty from the next game really plugs you into a military organization, and you kind of have the debate of like, at what point would I disobey orders? And it's really profound to think of like your character's backstory and like all they've been through, you know, militarily. And to be like, okay, at what point would I look at my superior and go, I can't do that? You know, and that is really compelling. And then for the last book, it's morality, which kind of looks kind of similar to D&D alignment of like, if you're a Force-sensitive Jedi or Sith, like at what point would you sacrifice your moral compass to gain more powers or to change the way you play? And so plugging that into this kind of fits to me, you know, Sith and Jedi. It fits more into the Warlock of like, if you're a Warlock, and a Paladin's oath, absolutely, of like, what would you sacrifice to get more power? And it's really compelling to see the trade-offs and to see like, I really honestly, like for my homebrew stuff that I changed to 5e, I love making the Warlock really overpowered because it's like, yeah, dude, this guy sold his soul. Like, he's going to be a little more powerful than you, fighter. And that's really compelling. Like, I think your backstory can inform, like, how powerful you are at the start because of what you have sacrificed.
Oh, yeah. So good. The first RPG system that I officially played was called Savage Worlds. It's a generic kind of game. And for their system, when you're buying a character, you choose, they call them edges and hindrances, and really just perks and drawbacks. So one edge could be like you are very accurate with handguns or rifles or something. It sounds very Fallout when I say it this way. And then a hindrance is something like maybe you have, you're crippled and you walk slower, or you have one eye. Simple stuff like that. And you the more hindrances you buy, the more points you have during character creation. I thought it was just very simple at the time. I thought, oh, this is great. But now with just how far RPGs have come in the past 10 years, it seems a little simple. But, you know, it really excited me back in the day.
It's the job done.
Mm-hmm. See, I look at that and absolutely, I think you can definitely apply that to character creation. I'm very, 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 very open as a DM when people are making characters like, oh, if I lose an eye, can I get an extra spell slot? Or, like, you know, basic stuff like that.
That's pretty cool.
If I can't speak, can I get 2 spells?
And so my players will definitely, like in my last campaign, I had a Dragonborn, like, huge fighter. And he's like, I really want to wield 2 two-handed weapons. And I was like, whoa, like, that's incredible. And I was like, okay, I mean, honestly, we'll take some stuff away, and I want to cut your movement speed in half. So, like, you'll have 15 movement speed. And he's like, deal. And so it was really interesting to have this humongous Dragonborn with these two-handed swords that he could swing and do so much damage. But like when his characters are like, help, we need help over here, like it would take so long for him to get to him.
He's just dragging these massive weapons.
But when he arrived, he hit like a freight train. And so it was, in the end, like a good balance. And so I think especially during character creation, I think you can mess with your backgrounds to be like, okay, I need to justify this DM. What do I need to sacrifice? And the Dungeon Master can, like, you know, do some mental math, especially if they know the system well enough. They can do some mental math and be like, okay, I'll let you do this if you take away this. Because it makes sense with the character. And yeah, I think this whole edges and hindrances from Savage Worlds fits so well into that, because Yeah, I think I should let my characters take all sorts of hindrances to get all sorts of edges. And it's so interesting to see characters like that have like, oh, I'm missing an arm and a leg, but I can do 2 more spell slots and I can see in the dark. Like, it's just so silly, and I love it.
See in the dark.
They'll just min-max themselves until they're just literally R2-D2. And they can't see or talk or touch.
That's great.
So the last one I want to talk about is from a game called Fiasco.
This one's great.
We've all played this one. So Fiasco is a GM-less RPG experience where your group will just sit down and write. The closest I can describe it is like a Coen Brothers style film.
Yeah.
Probably more of the funnier side of those things, though not necessarily. But it's just a really great collaboration writing tool that within 2 hours you will have created a story that seems like a film. And it's great.
Yeah, I think the main thing about this is when you're creating backgrounds and you're doing a session 0 and you're looking around at all your players, you want them to connect. You want them to have some sort of connection to each other, right? Like, you could have them all have beautiful connections into the world, but then when they're at a tavern, they have very little reason to be together as an adventuring party.
Yeah, they even talk to each other.
It's like, oh, I'm an Orthodox priest, and you're just a contract killer. Let's be friends.
Let's hang out and fight enemies together. High five.
It's very hard to. You can do it, obviously, but like to make it logically make sense. I think the Fiasco relationships are so good, and I've instituted this into my game. Is I will look to my players and I'll be like, okay, pick the player. I guess because I've been with players who have sat at my same table over and over for the past 2 or 3 years. So they have their kind of preferred positions at the table. And so they're making their characters. I'll be like, look to the player to your left, look to the player to your right. You have a relationship with the player to your left and to the player to your right. What is that relationship? And it makes it that all of the players suddenly have this connection. And the relationship doesn't have to be like, oh, you're brother and sister. You know, it could be like, oh, I was a hitman and you were my target that I missed. Or, you know, like you were my priest.
This guy's my sister's ex-husband. It's like, well,
yeah, like,
okay. Or we were neighbors.
Yeah, we were neighbors. Or you were my priest and I'm your parishioner. Or like all these different things.
We fought in the same war.
Yeah. Combat veterans.
And they're just like simple little things that all of a sudden you have a reason to be around this person. Or even better, if you already had a reason to be around them, now it's complicated.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's interesting.
Yes. And the bottom line is you don't have to have it with everyone. That's why I like how it's like it's just the person to your left and the person to your right. Because at that point, you have relationships with 2 people in the party, which is enough to link you into the party. Because I mean, that's really all you need. It's like, oh no, I know him because he knows this person, and they know this person because they know this person, and it connects the whole party and links them rather than like, oh, we all serve in the same troop or we're all this. It's so great because all of these ridiculous backgrounds that should not even be in the same room together suddenly make sense to each have an individual connection to someone around the table.
Like a hermit, a priest, and a
and
pirate
a soldier.
walk into a bar.
Yeah, it's like what?
like that's a joke. That's not an adventuring party.
Turns out they're all in love with the same woman. She works at the tavern.
Yeah, no, like I think this is so good to link the party together because a lot of DMs they'll get all of this especially first time DMs, they'll get all of these very, very interesting character backstories and they'll be like, oh no, how do these fit together at all? And it's very daunting to look at session 1 and be like, you all meet in a tavern and there's a big rat downstairs. And it's like, what? Why would a soldier and a cleric and a pirate and a hermit join together to fight that rat, you know?
So yeah, Fiasco is definitely worth using. I haven't used it in my D&D, usually because there's just so many things going on, but I would love to.
I think it's great. So For you guys, what do you think are some of the backgrounds that you hear and you're like, oh no? Like, what just the worst backgrounds?
Oh, well, I mentioned already the Shadow Orphan.
Yeah.
And that is just, you pick the urchin, and you pick, like, the thief, and all of a sudden you got a guy with no connection. He just wants to kill things.
They have no parents.
Yeah, no
mentor.
no connection at all, and I hate that. And I've seen that done so many times. Usually, it's by people who are
Chaotic neutral.
Yes, they're sort of video gamers.
Yeah,
they're really playing a solo D&D game.
Yeah,
and they're just forced to be around other people.
Yeah, oftentimes they go off and do their own thing.
Yeah.
Or
they just won't help the party when they're in need. I really, just don't play with this player.
I think the way to solve this is the specifics on from Xanathar's guide. I think it's page 66. Like, they have a bunch of like family connections and ridiculous, like, wonderful like connections to make your character real. And just rolling on those random tables, you'll see, like, this makes my character so much more compelling just by these random tables of, like, oh, I have a twin brother who went here, and my mom died when I was a child, and my dad is a lawful good bartender. And it's like, all these things are just, like, so great, you know?
Yeah. So actually on 66, it looks like this is the tables, the class background tables. And so for the urchin, it has, I became an urchin because, and they have 6 different things, and they're all pretty darn good. Like one of them, a notorious thief looked after me and other orphans, and we spied and stole to earn our keep. Like already, that's a much more interesting connector.
Yeah. There's hooks that's all over that thing, you know?
It's just bobbed up in hooks.
Just a big...
I mean, that's what DMs want. They want their players to just have so many hooks around them that if you even put your fingers near them, they're already connected. You're stuck with a bunch of hooks from their back.
Just covered in blood, filled with barbs.
That's what you want.
Sounds like a Friday night to me.
Oh, no.
Playing D&D, of course. Come on.
What are some other terrible backgrounds?
The hermit.
Well, I mean, like combinations of things.
So we have the perfect guy.
Oh, I know.
It's the guy who's just good at everything and has 0 flaws. It's like I'm Superman. I do everything well. I never do. I'm the good boy.
Okay. I have a story about that. So we were playing my first game of 5e, and I was like really making my world and making everything, like, you know, solidifying all of these things that have held on for the past, you know, few years. And my friend, he's playing a ranger, and he is essentially Legolas. And I'm like, okay, cool, you know, your ranger, whatever. And he wrote trait, bond, ideal, and he didn't write a flaw. And I said, okay, like, that's fine. Your character is kind of, you know, a Legolas type character, you know, an elf ranger. I'm like, whatever. Just make sure you write a flaw next time. Just think about your flaw, what your character's bad at, or what. And he's like, okay. Next session, still no flaw, would not write a flaw. And I was like, okay, try to just try to make a flaw. He's like, okay. Still, next session did not make a flaw. And so we went through the entire campaign, and this guy never, ever wrote down a flaw for his character. And really, it made sense because all of the other characters, they didn't need him to write anything down. His flaw was that he thought he had no flaw. And so all the other characters knew, like, you know, they'd look at his character sheet and there's no flaw written down, but they knew.
Wait, is this a perfect guy or is this a Reddit nice guy?
Oh no!
Yeah, like,
they never have flaws either.
Like it was a flawless character. And so it was really interesting to see that. And I think it's very easy to, like, you know, when you're trying to do wish fulfillment or you're trying to do fantasy fulfillment and making a character, it's sometimes it is hard to be like, oh no, my character has flaws. But, like, giving your character flaws makes the character so much more profoundly interesting than it does to be like, my character's a perfect fighter with no flaws. It's like, okay, I'm falling asleep, you know?
I'm gagging as we speak.
Isn't John Wick kind of like a perfect guy?
Oh no.
'Cause he just kills people like effortlessly.
I mean, I guess you could say he cares too much about his dog, but
That's his flaw.
Well,
yeah, I think the bottom line is like those flaws, especially with each background, they're very profoundly interesting. They're not like harmful to your character. They're like really creative and good. And so it's like, why would you avoid that?
It's opening up doors to like further stories.
Oh, yeah.
It's not like saying, oh well, I have a drug addiction and I can only adventure one night a week.
Because I need my drugs.
Yeah, it's not like some debilitating thing. It's like, oh no.
Yeah, it's like when you see a chaotic evil person, you have to confront them. And it's like all those things are like really good, and they aren't going to harm your adventure, you know? Like, I think for me personally, if I were to only use a trait, bond, flaw, ideal, I think that's the 4 of them. If I could only pick one of them, I would pick the flaw every time, because the flaw is the most profoundly interesting for your backstory. Every time.
Wow.
Oh, I have one. This one is called How is this guy level 1?
Oh no. Okay.
Because it's a character, or a player makes a character, he comes to the table, he's like, oh yeah, for the past 50 years I was in the military, and then I was with other adventuring parties and they all died, and I'm the only survivor, and then I had a wizard's tower for a long time, whatever. They have this huge
I slayed like 5 dragons.
Yeah. And
the
I'm,
Lich King.
And I'm a level 1 fighter. I'm like, well, what? How?
And they're the person who shows up to your game and they've already written a book on their character.
Yeah.
So
they're going to be mad when they die in the first session.
See, I think this is why I make my character usually, not with like first-time players, but with players that have played a lot and they kind of know, and I'm like, I want to restart a campaign, whatever. They know 5e. I usually start them at level 3. Because then it gives them a little more room to justify a backstory of potentially slaying a werewolf or whatever, you know, because they're level 3 and they have a subclass and they have all this stuff, and it's like, okay. But yeah, when you're starting at level 1, it's like pretty much any backstory where you are strong or, you know, cool or heroic at all really doesn't make sense for a level 1 character.
Yeah. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Don't make the most interesting thing that happened to your character happen in the past.
Oh yeah, that's so good.
Because you can only go downhill from there.
Oh no, yeah.
Like you want the interesting stuff to be happening right now.
Unless maybe that is what your character is meant to be, just a downhill spiraling character.
Well, if it was an intentional setup and they were aware
nihilistic,
of that
cynical character.
And then everything is just sort of like disappointing for them.
Oh no.
It sounds like a bad campaign.
They used to be a noble.
Ooh, I think played right, it could be really interesting. And then their arc would be to kind of get
the
joy,
redemption.
Yeah. That's so
But
fun.
yeah, in general, you have to kind of, I think a good way to do it is you look at, especially new players, and be like, okay, this is the perspective of levels. And to be like, okay, Aragorn from Lord of the Rings is like a level 7 or 8, you know, and Gandalf is like a level 18. And like to look at like characters from famous things and be like, okay, these characters are this level, these characters are this level, so they know what level they're starting at. Because it's very easy to be like, oh, I'm playing D&D, I want to be this heroic this and that who's slayed this and this, and it's like, no, you're starting like you haven't done those things yet.
You haven't slayed anyone yet. Yeah.
And so I think it's good to like be able to give them the perspective of like, okay, you know, this major comic book character, yeah, that guy would be like a level 16. So just cool your jets, and you know, you're level 1.
You're a bean farmer. Get over yourself.
Bean farm. How do you farm?
Great
beans?
Background, by the way. Just bean farmer.
I think you actually ranch beans.
A little lassoing beans involved.
That should be the name of our next D&D party, is just the lassoing beans. So this has got me thinking, what really makes good backgrounds? What separates good from bad backgrounds here, guys?
I think it's really the collaboration with you and the dungeon master, and to be like, okay, I like, this is what my arc could be. You know, like I could have a really good redemption arc, or you know, I don't know where my father is. Obviously the
Yeah.
DM is like, yeah, your father's gonna show up in the last episode. Like all of these things are just bait that you give the dungeon master. Like we said, hooks that hook in the dungeon master, and he can use them for other things. And so, really, I think the best backgrounds are the ones that provide the most hooks for not even necessarily the dungeon master, but for the whole party to be able to comment
Yeah.
on. Because if you have some
So-
cool backgrounds and the dungeon master's like, oh, that's definitely going to play a part in the finale. But to have like another character, like another like player to comment on that, be like, oh, so you lost your father? So did I. And it's like, oh,
And my mother. And my sister.
oh no. Oh no.
It's the Shadow Orphans.
He's coming out again.
But like,
No, but I think you have a great point, and I think that for me, backgrounds should do two things. It should tie you into the world, meaning that there's going to be plot elements that are tied to your character, and you're going to be tied to the other characters at the table.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect of a background is it should inform how you play the game.
huh.
Because keep in mind, you're not yourself when you're at your table. You're not just like, oh, I show up and now I'm this rogue in this imaginary world. It's a different character that you're playing, and they're different from who you are as a person. So you need to have ways to determine how would this person actually act. And that's what the background can do through the ideals, the bonds, and flaws that you create. They're going to determine the way in which your character is going to interact with the other characters at the table or with the elements of
Yeah,
the
because
world.
that's
Dang, that's really
yeah,
profound.
that's a profound, difference of being like, okay, no. Think about, okay, how would you react in the situation? You go, oh, I'd ignore it, or I'd do whatever. But like, if you look at the situation, you go, how would you react to this if you were born in the streets, had no money your whole life, and ate, leather for dinner? Like you're like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like I would address this so differently. And it's like having the empathy of your backstory and being able to be like, no, my character, as much as I want to agree to this, I can't, because I come from a position where that doesn't make sense for someone who's lived this way his whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I ran my last campaign, I stopped about halfway through, and I had an entire session, or at least the first half of an entire session, where I just asked the players what they like, what they dislike, and where they want their players or where they want their characters to go. And so part of it was just me getting feedback in general, just for gameplay like quality, but the rest of it was just where they want their story to head. Because what the worst thing that I could do as a GM is like not enable players to get what they want from the story. And so I think doing a checkup like that was really helpful, because it made the finale a lot better. Unfortunately, we even though I planned a finale and we played a finale campaign, everybody refused to let that be the last one. They wanted to do one more that we never actually got to do. So it just kind of
Classic
left
real life.
hanging, because then college happened. So it's like we got up to the very last chapter of the book, and the book was like destroyed, and we'll never know. Even though I know what happened.
Oh, that's good. Oh. So,
Yeah.
I guess in general, what do you guys think about random tables? Because I know Xanathar's Guide introduced a ton of random tables, and there already are a lot in the background section of the player's handbook. And what do you guys think? Do you use them? Do you roll with them? Do you just say, hey, pick whatever you want from them? Like, how do you guys use them?
So the technique that I have used for my character background generation is I let the players first they pick what they want to have, hermit, let's say, and then I let them roll on the tables first, and if they don't like what they rolled, they can pick anything from that table.
Huh.
But almost every time, in fact, I think probably every time, the players just go with the one that they rolled because it sparks their imagination.
That is,
yeah.
I almost can't believe that.
I didn't know that this was not officially the roll. Like, I thought that was just how it was done. But then recently, some people I told, they were shocked to discover I do it this way. But it works very well because you're sort of discovering
I'm
your
shocked
character.
too.
Yeah, I think that random tables show you possibilities that you wouldn't normally think of, which is awesome. So I love them. I don't necessarily like having it to where, oh, you roll this, you're stuck with this. But I love the inspiration aspect of, oh yeah, I really want to pick that because that's a really cool idea to have. an urchin who is a paladin. Like, that doesn't make any sense, but let's roll with it and see what happens.
That's so weird because, I'm the opposite. I go, hey, guys, backstory, obviously, for my pretty social game, like, this is important. And I go, pick whatever you want. If you're undecided, roll. And, like, and it's kind of the opposite of that. Of, like, you guys go roll and then think of what that could be. And then if you don't like it, pick something else. But, like, the whole randomness of it is, like, profoundly interesting because for me, the more I'm thinking about the philosophy of Dungeons and Dragons, just role-playing games in general, I think, like, do I even need a dice? Like, are we capable of having a creative enough table to just, like, make the best story possible? But then the dice always does things where I'm like, I couldn't even have thought of that. Like, nothing could have failed that much, or nothing could have succeeded that much, or nothing could have been that random for me to ever have thought about in any way. So I think for backgrounds, it's the same thing.
Yeah. That's a good insight about dice because I think that an element of randomness is just helpful. Just a little chaos makes the world more interesting. Because, like, if you were just sitting down writing a story, there's certain things that you would do and not do every time.
I mean, statistically speaking, a dragon is going to kill a normal person every single time.
Yeah.
But the one time out of 100 that the human wins, that's just hilarious and awesome.
Yeah, it makes you feel really good.
And I think for one of the campaign I'm doing right now, I had this cool plot with a dragon egg, where they were supposed to basically give it back to its master, or, like, sell it or whatever. But they weren't supposed to know it was a dragon egg. It was just like this big emerald kind of thing. And one of my characters rolled a nat 20 and was like, oh, that's a dragon egg.
Wait, what did he roll an nat 20 on?
Perception of what this thing was.
So you can't actually crit skill checks.
Well,
in the rules as written.
Weird. That's how I play.
I'm not saying you're wrong, but just so that everyone knows.
Wow.
You can only crit.
Dude, that's how I play.
Attacks.
Oh my god. That is... Come on. Dude.
Otherwise, you have a 5% chance of just being able to do anything.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, I can't read hieroglyphics, but I'll roll. I got a 20. I guess I can read ancient Hebrew now.
No, you have to have a DM that's willing to be like, okay, that makes sense.
Like, I want to...
like, if someone goes...
I want to convince the whole town to jump off a cliff. 5% chance. There they go. They all jump off a cliff.
No, like, I think there could be a balance, obviously. Like, if you have a DM that, like, wants to narratively... if someone says, I want to jump to the moon, like, a nat 20 is not going to let them jump to the moon.
Oh, I don't know, Jake.
Yeah.
There's a quote that I love that says, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? I'm going to change it and say, what would you do if you had a 5% chance of succeeding literally anything?
I mean, that's... I feel like I can't even address this based on what you guys have said, because that's always how I've been playing, but I've always had a good balance of, like, what logically can happen. But, like...
Right, like, seriously speaking, obviously, there's limitations to what a player can try. Like, I think there's a chance that a person could hold up an egg to the light and maybe, it moves or squirms in a way, and they're like, holy crap, like, this, I can conclude that that's a dragon's egg.
Maybe if you're just strong enough, you could jump to the moon.
No, absolutely not.
I've been squatting
also,
a lot
the moon
lately,
is flat,
so
and D&D's flat Earth. But anyway.
Wait, really?
I don't know. I always assume that because it's flat on, like, the world is flat. Also in real life. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh no! Don't invite this conversation, Jake.
So
we all know time is a cube.
So bottom line, like,
I thought time was a flat circle.
No, it's a cube.
Time is
all right, let's get back on.
So anyway, so my players like they found out this is a dragon egg and it hatched and all this stuff, and so now my players have a baby red dragon that they're trying to raise as their own, and seeing that. All of that happened because of someone's nat 20. Like, that dragon egg was just a plot point. It was just a way to move the story forward. But no, like, this half-orc paladin has changed his entire way of life to be this dragon's dad. And has, like, he's altered all of his points into intelligence and all of his points into nature, into animal handling, just to care for what he calls his son, which is a lawful evil or whatever red dragon. So it's
classic.
Is the dragon's name just son, like S-U-N?
No, his name is Igneal.
Ooh,
and
weird.
it's been so great. And I look at my campaign, and we're probably 30 sessions deep, and to look back at session 1 where this happened, I can't even imagine all of these 30 sessions without this baby dragon with them. And all of that came from a nat 20. And so I love the idea of randomness, and like I guess this fits into backgrounds of being like, whenever you look at your backgrounds, you be like, ooh, I like this one or this one. Just roll. And whatever you get, just think about what you get. Because it may be something so profound that you didn't even think about putting it together beforehand.
That's true.
It's like in improv when they get suggestions from the audience.
Yeah.
And it pushes your brain in new directions that you just weren't even near.
It's like, oh, you're a literal part.
No, I mean, okay, we're getting a little off track, but bottom line is I have been in several improv troupes and done several improvisational shows, and I've done shows where I go, this needs to be perfect, and I try to plan out everything. And like I go, okay, we have this plant in the audience that will say this, and we have everything planned out, and all of those shows end up worse than the shows where you actually look at the audience and be like, give me a suggestion for this, and they go, lobster, and the show is better. Like the randomness makes it better. So I think even in backgrounds, like looking at those tables and it looks so daunting and there's so many options, just roll and see what happens. You'll be surprised what your brain does when you go, ooh, a pirate paladin. I can work with this,
I could get diggy with that.
Okay. It's almost, I don't even know if you call it randomness as much as curated inspiration. Because if you have the ability to choose something else, if you don't like it, that gives you this freedom. I think we could talk about this for a lot longer, but we need to move on.
This is just the idea of the philosophy of randomness.
In Xanathar's Guide, they have a really great system for generating an entire character's backstory, specifically with family and life events. And speaking of things that push your brain into new directions, it'll give you your parents and what your parents' job is, and how many siblings you have and what your siblings' jobs are. I actually wrote a blog that you can read at voxarcana.org, where you can read about the families that I generated. And it's just really cool if you've got the time and the interest to develop your characters. Because personally, I've never played in a campaign where any of the characters have created families. Like, you have all these connections, right? Like thief connections or guild. But nobody asks, oh, who's my dad? What's my mom doing today?
Who's your daddy?
Who is your daddy?
It's surprising how much flavor is in the whole family stuff. Like, because a lot of times you think of an adventurer, they don't have a mom or dad or kids or, I mean, the biggest glaring thing that stands out is if you look at most people in the modern world, I'd say a majority of people are married. But if you look at D&D characters, how many Dungeons and Dragons characters are married? It's like none. It's almost zero.
None.
It's profound, the lack of family and just like normal attributes of a normal person that there are in characters sometimes. And I think even saying just like a character being like, oh, I've got a wife back home and I miss her so much. It's like that, even that is like so different than so many characters that lack family.
I wonder why that is. Is this because when people are designing their perfect, like, fun little toy life, they focus on themselves and not on their family?
Okay, my theory is that it stems from kind of first edition and the more antagonistic dungeon master perspective of like, oh, if you have a wife, then obviously the Lich King is going to come out at the end during the boss fight and is going to have a knife to the throat of your wife. And it's just like you're giving the dungeon master too many hooks to screw you over in the end. Like, family is, and I'm guilty of this. Like in Tomb of Annihilation, one of my characters who's a samurai, he's a rare character that has a strong bond with his full family. And me, I was like, okay, I had like the main corporate villain just take them hostage. And it was just like, if you ever want to see your family again, you will do what I ask. And it just like, it was so, and then like I realized it was like, oh, this is working really good, and like it was a really cool thing. But then I realized, oh my god, anytime my players gave me a family to use, I immediately took them hostage, and and so it's like, oh, maybe that's why people avoid that, is because they don't want to give dungeon masters more, leverage, exactly, manipulative powers over their character.
Maybe Jake was the villain the whole time.
I have your family, Jake.
I figured that out a long time ago.
One last thing that I read about on a blog, and I kind of appropriated the idea. This guy had the idea for if you meet a NPC, especially if it's like a hireling or somebody that comes back time and time again. Whenever you meet an NPC, you have 3 tables that are kind of nested within each other, and the details get more specific the more you meet them, the more you interact with them. And so the first time you run into them, you're like, oh, well, they have like a lazy eye. Something very simple you just notice across the room. Or then as you get to know them, you're like, oh, well, they have like deep family issues because it's constantly affecting their life. And then, you know, as you get to know them more, you roll on that third table and it's something really personal, like maybe this person is actually planning, to leave town and whatever. The idea is just that you have very minimal investment in designing the backgrounds for NPCs, and you just drill down over time as it becomes necessary.
That's so there's like tiers of what they will reveal. And
yes.
So like, they'll be like, oh, I hate the government. And then the next one will be like, I'm, planning on ditching town. And the last one will be like, I'm planning on bombing Congress. Like,
yes, you met Guy Fawkes in D&D.
Oh my god.
No, I love that because I guess for me, I have so many situations where my characters are just around a campfire and I will just say, have banter, talk, reveal stuff. And I want them to interact with each other and have profound instances of communication where they kind of reveal stuff to each other naturally. And having an NPC there that reveals their backstory slowly makes so much sense, because I think when you're making your backstory with just your players in general, I think there's a degree of it that should be hidden from the other players to be revealed later. And I don't think you should be able to look at a character sheet of a player and be like, oh, I know exactly everything about you. Like, there should be stuff that, like, it makes sense with the character sheet, but it gets a lot deeper than what you could ever read in just, perusing their character sheet.
Yeah. I think that's what makes it interesting. Well, I think it's time that we move into the vault. This week's vault question: what is your ideal level range, aka the Goldilocks zone?
Ooh, wait, to play in or to be the dungeon master for?
Ooh, let's answer both if they're different.
Oh man, I think that like playing as the higher levels is a lot of fun because you have a lot more tools and things that you could do, and you just have a lot more. It's like a god in the world. Like, you can do pretty much anything.
Oh, yeah, especially at the very high levels.
It's kind of fun. Yeah, it's kind of fun to be able to cast, like, crazy spells, like Wish and things like that.
Wow.
So your perfect level is 20?
I am perhaps the exact opposite.
So, I still have what I want to say for DMing for. But I like to feel powerful. Like, I like to feel the progression of a character and, like, going through and like realizing like, oh, I used to be super weak and now I'm like this big buff like brawler dude. No one can touch me. Like, that feels good as a player. But as a DM, I really like DMing for low level parties, like level 1, level 0. Like I love just the weak, scrawny like scraps that players have to get into. So that's what
I have never disagreed with someone more on this podcast. I think I am the exact total opposite of you, David. Like, when I am a player, so when I am a dungeon master, I want to play for characters that have decent abilities. So I'd say my Goldilocks level is like level 4 to like level 8. is like my perfect Goldilocks level for like me as a dungeon master. Because getting higher than that, you have to start throwing out like weirdly difficult monsters, and combat starts taking way longer. But like if I'm a player, I want to be level 0. You know, like I want to be nothing. I want to have to walk up to a bartender and be like, "Hello there, sir. Can I have some beer?" And that guy could punch me and kill me. Like that. Like that is so. It makes the whole world threatening, and it makes it like really interesting to interact with all these people that if they really want to kick you as hard as they can, they could probably knock you out. like I don't know. I love that whole aspect of like relying, like not having a physical backup to rely on. Because most of the time, social encounters in Dungeons and Dragons, you approach this thing, you go, all right, the bard will look at everyone and be like, oh, I can take care of this. And they go up and they do some social encounter. And if worse comes to worst, you know, everyone draws their sword and it's a combat encounter. But with at level 0 or level 1, whatever, like you don't have that combat encounter to rely on. Like you are solely relying on the social. And it gives this whole new aspect of the game that you're not expecting. And that's why I love Dungeon Crawl Classics, because you have 3 different very, very, very weak characters. And like you look at them and it's like, okay, one guy that I have is a corn farmer. Another guy, like it's just a normal guy, but he owns 1 cow. And another guy's a baker. And it's like, okay, let's enter a dungeon that way.
And let's go fight the Lich King
with a
and so like level 0, eventually there's going to be a meat grinder, and you're going to see a guy running out with a chef's hat riding a cow that's covered in blood, and it's just like, I'm now level 1. It's just so silly to see that. And I love very low level encounters because they I don't know, they feel more risky. Because, you know, at level 20, nothing can challenge you other than, like, a god.
Yeah. That's a problem that I have with D&D 5 in general. It's just because I really think that the exponential power curve of players going from, like, above average people into just literally demigods. Like, or gods if you're a wizard.
Yeah.
You just cast Wish and, like, the world is unmade. And he can cast that, you know, once a day. Every day for the rest of his life.
Let's make a new one.
He becomes like Dr. Manhattan.
He's just Thanos.
So
he's Thanos,
profound.
right? Like,
just like,
I just want to kill half. Yeah, he wants to kill half of the world, and then the next day, let's kill the other half. Why not?
God.
I'm a level 20 wizard. Damn it. Okay, so I'm kind of in the middle of you guys. But before I say mine, I have an idea of figuring out a way to do a 5e funnel where you start with 3 level 0s without classes.
Yes.
And you just pick the broad category of background. So my guy is just an urchin with no specific like traits, bonds, and flaws.
Okay.
Or whatever. And then you run them through this adventure that's made to kill everyone. Yeah. And then whoever comes out the other side levels up into level 1, and then you further define them.
Yeah.
I wonder if that would be fun. I'd have to play with it a little because I think D&D's stats just take so long to make one character.
I'm just imagining that though, like getting to level 20 and being like, oh, my pirate got to level 20 and is now essentially a god. And it's like, what if this pirate was killed at level 0? And it profoundly, like, you're like, oh my god, like this character, it only exists because, you know, the baker died in the first dungeon from a basilisk, you know?
Oh no.
Basilisk would probably be just a regular rat.
Yeah, just
big
bit
gross rat.
It's not a giant rat.
No,
I'm saying
a normal rat.
Half in a rat trap. Okay, well, my ideal Goldilocks level range is the same-ish for both, and that's going to be level 3 to play and to GM for. Because at level 1, you're just too squishy, but also you don't have a lot of choices and decisions to make in combat other than, like, I swing my sword or I cast my cantrip. And then at level 20, in both cases, is just so many things to track and do. And, like, everybody, like, the monk has got all these key points he's spending, and the sorcerer's got, like, whatever. Like, there's just too much going on for me. So I think at level 3 is when you get your ability,
subclass,
like your class feature, your subclass. And so to me, that's when the game opens up combat wise, so they have enough health to survive, they have enough decisions to make to not be bored every combat, and the variety is good, and the variety of monsters is good. And then as far as GMing for that, you know their limitations, you know what it takes to kill them, and you have obviously more monster choice. So just level 3, maybe level up to level 5 is that sweet spot of just that low tier. It's my fave.
Yeah, I think that's a good range.
Thank you for listening to Vox Arcana Episode 9. I'm William.
I'm Jake.
And I'm David.
Follow us on our social media. Twitter is at Vox Arcana Pod. Facebook is at Vox Arcana Podcast. Instagram is also at Vox Arcana Podcast. You can email us questions, comments, and concerns at voxarcanapodcast@gmail.com. If you sign up now at farmersonly.com, you may match with us. We'll see you next time.